Paul Gelder was an Australian Royal Navy clearance diver who was participating in a counter-terrorism exercise in Sydney Harbor when he was suddenly attacked by a bull shark. Now, this attack ultimately left him with no right leg and no right arm. Paul did not want his amputations to define his limitations, nor did he want to live in a life of fear based on this experience, so he almost immediately got himself back in the ocean. Today, you can see Paul working as a co-host on Discovery Channel's Shark Week, where he's not only swimming with the sharks, but oftentimes feeding them by hand. And when he's not at work feeding sharks, you might catch him jumping out of a plane or snowboarding down a mountain.
Quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
I was reading your book, and when you were describing yourself as a kid and how your nose got bit off by a dog, and like, not that my nose got bit off by a dog, but it's like the mischief and the trouble and the injuries and all that stuff that comes with just being a rambunctious, that's a mom word, a rambunctious boy. Like, I was that same kid. And so as that develops into a career, like for you, like in special ops, so to speak, within the military, or for myself as an athlete, like you really learn to assess your body. What's the difference between being hurt and being injured, right? Like, I hurt my elbow, but are you hurt or are you injured? And there's a big, and so on and so forth. Like, I can typically tell, like, every time I've ever had surgery, when I'm in training and something happens, I'm like, that's probably not a good thing right now, Yeah,
the bad clicks and crunches and the good clicks and crunches. Mine was pretty evident. I popped up out of the water and my whole hand was bitten off by a shark, and I was swimming through a pool of my own blood. So I kind of knew something was wrong, but that also didn't stop me from completing my task. I had a task of getting back to the boat and living. And so one hand out of the water, just one leg actually operating, swimming back to my safety boat. So you don't let the things that are screwing you over stop you from performing to achieve the goal that you need to achieve.
When you got hit with the bull shark, and you were describing it in your book, bull sharks, are the most aggressive shark in the water?
I don't like to say things like that aren't scientifically based, because I know a lot of scientists now, and they get very upset when you say things like that.
But they're highly aggressive.
They can be highly aggressive. There's the top three. There's the great white, which is called the white shark. The media gave it the great. Tiger sharks and the bull sharks. The bull sharks are known to be dangerous when you're in the water with them. A lot of the time that's because they exist in a murky sort of environment, whether it's river mouths or freshwater streams and stuff like that. And so they will investigate with their teeth like all the other sharks, but they can't actually see you in those environments. And so they're more likely to come and investigate you with their mouths, as opposed to, say, a tiger shark or a great white that can actually see what you are, unless, you're a surfer on the surface with your arms outside the board, and all it can see is a silhouette. And you might look like the bottom of a turtle or a seal swimming around. Yeah. And so, bull sharks definitely bite a lot of people. There's a Reunion Island off the coast of Africa where surfing is pretty much banned because there was so many so many bull shark attacks.
When you were in the water, though, you were talking about when the bull shark finally let go. Is it typical of a bull shark to let go and then actually come back again?
Everyone says, why did it let you go? It didn't. It didn't let me go. It grabbed me by the right hand and the right hamstring in the same bite, took me down and just tore me apart until it ripped my hamstring and my hand out of my body. Yeah. So technically it didn't let me go. It was swallowing while I was swimming back to my safety boat. So I don't know if it was like I tasted like shit. Maybe it was choking on my muscle because I had big hamstring, or it was the sound of the engine of the boat. I have no idea. But fortunately, I got back to the boat before it came to me. And, I was thinking, I'd never even seen a big dangerous shark before. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, they can smell a drop of blood in 10,000 leagues of ocean. And we all know there was bull sharks in the harbor. I'm thinking there's going to be sharks coming from everywhere. Meanwhile, I'm trying to swim back to the safety boat with one hand and one leg. Like, I'm not going fast enough. But fortunately, I got to the boat first, and I don't know what happened to it.
So I hear by your own admission that you're quite the rapper, actually.
No, I was once upon a time, long ago.
Come on.
In a land far, far away.
You got, come on, you got to spit some free flow on this thing.
Mate, that was never my strong suit. I could never freestyle. I was okay. Like I could write the raps down. I could do that. You know, you would have read we opened for Snoop Dogg in 1998, and we put out an EP. But you know, freestyling was never my strong suit. If anyone wants to listen to it, the song's still on Spotify. It's called Smokin' Hydro. Smoking with no G. Okay. If you put smoking, it doesn't come up. All right. But yeah, so I do the first two verses. Then my friend from the Cook Islands does the last one. I gotta specify that because he drops an N bomb at the end of it. Don't want anyone to think that that's me doing that because he's an Islander kid. He thinks he can do it back in 1998. Fair enough, but that it definitely wasn't me.
Okay. So for clarification, I'll have to check it out because you didn't mention the name of any of the songs that you had in the book. So I was like,
it's just about smoking weed.
All right, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Puff, puff, now let me hit it. Not an addict, but as a habit, I gotta have it. In between, I'm fucking like a rabbit.
Nice, not bad. Yeah. So in your book, you talked about opening up for Snoop. Did you actually get to meet him when you guys opened up for him?
I didn't. No. I was moving all the shit off stage, all of our props and stuff, and everyone else of the crew was backstage meeting him. I didn't realize that. I was just trying to be helpful. And then we had the official after party, and he said it was his wife's birthday, so he didn't come. The rest of the crew came, and we had a fat old party. We had joint rolling competitions in the VIP room, and it was pretty cool. It was a good night for a young 2-year-old kid.
Yeah, I could imagine. In your book, talking about that, because you were talking about how like your checkered past, like you got into a lot of trouble. Your dad was a police officer. Your mom, did your mom actually work, or was she kind of a stay-at-home mom at the time?
Yeah, Dad didn't. It was that time period where the mums didn't really work that much, and Dad didn't want her to work. He wanted her to be at home with the kids, and so that sucked for her because she had to put her dreams on hold and deal with us monsters the whole time. And I feel for her for that because we put her through the paces.
In reading your book, you talked about moving around a lot. I moved around a lot as a kid as well. My parents divorced when I was 5, and it left for a very unstable home. And it was the kind of environment where typically somebody like me, because there was a lot of your personality as a young kid that kind of reminded me of me, but typically somebody like me could get into a lot of trouble because I was left unsupervised to my own accord. But you talked about the kind of trouble that you got into, like the shoplifting, the fighting, the drugs. And then you had this like turnaround where you decided finally that you were going to enlist in the Army. And actually, for me, when I was reading the book, because I understand human nature and I understand how difficult it is to make that kind of turnaround. Like, what was that period like for you? Going from this kind of unruly kid that just does pretty much whatever you want, whenever you want type of thing, to suddenly being in the Army. And like, how is it that you were able to maintain? Because I would imagine most kids that were in that situation would have been like, I'm out of here. I'm done with this.
Yeah. I imagine it would have been on a grander scale with you as well, for anyone going through that here in the States, because look, in Australia, we have crazy. I'm not going to lie. We have crazy, but we have like 30, 40 million people in Australia. You guys have like 330 million. And so it's not like you have more crazy. You've got more per capita, but you've got another level of crazy out here. And so you've got the guns, and you've got the crackheads, and you've got the homeless, and you've got all manner of wildness to get into as a young teen. So I can imagine it must have been very enticing to get into that sort of world when you were growing up. For us, it was just like going out drinking and fighting. There was no real risk of like dying, but it was getting to a point where I was looking down the barrel of either I was going to be dead or in jail by the time I was 23. And then I got jumped by 20 dudes at a party. And so it all just came at this pinnacle point in time where I was becoming a young man. I was looking to the future, and I was thinking, I can't go on like this. This is not what life is supposed to be like. There's got to be more out there. Like, I knew about it. I knew about this big world full of adventures and fun and challenge, but I was just stuck in this shitty, boring town with no idea how to to make that happen. No money, no career prospects. I'd flunked high school. I was working in a kitchen. So I just did the only thing that I could think of, and I just packed everything up and I moved town and went to another town to start again. And then that was when the rapping and working in strip clubs came into play for a couple of years. And then that all fell apart again. And I was just like, I don't know. I'm not responsible enough to be in charge of my own life. If I just continue down this path, I'm going to be working in a bar in the suburbs, just probably married with a couple of kids, like struggling for money, growing up poor, and my kids growing up poor like I was. And I couldn't think of anything more horrendous than that being my future. And so my two younger brothers had actually joined the army first. And so I talked to them about it. And they said, yeah, look, it's great. Just don't join infantry. We know you. It's too hard. You won't make it. And so the next day I joined infantry.
But you know, when you end up becoming a Royal Navy clearance diver, I would imagine that there's a lot of, aptitude to this. Like because, well, I mean,
which is where I struggled the most.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But you struggle, you may have done, but you succeeded. And it's how does a person coming from someone who flunks out of high school into one of the most prestigious military units in the world succeed in such a thing?
Study. Have you ever seen that Robert De Niro and what's his name? It's the movie's called Men of Honor.
With Cuba Gooding Jr.
Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro.
Give me my 12, Cookie. The great movie, man. The great movie.
Yeah. So I drew inspiration from that movie, actually, because he did the same thing. He was struggling with the science behind it. And you can imagine the science behind it then and the science behind it now is vastly different. Like, it's crazy the science that's gone into not just, hard helmet diving, but mixed gas diving, pure oxygen rebreathers, underwater pneumatic tools, disposing of bombs and mines. So much came into play, and I just struggled to wrap my head around it while also being totally fatigued and worn down from all of the diving and training that we had to do. So I just had to, I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and I think that's one of the most important things that you have to come to a realization about yourself in life. Where do you excel and where do you not? And if you can put a lot of or extra time into those areas where you don't excel, whether it be extra study, learning things like we used to, like our times table back in the day, they call it parrot fashion, just over and over and over and over and over until it sinks in. And then you know it like a fucking Tupac song, and you can just call on it anytime you want. So that's all I did. I knew I wasn't that smart. I excelled physically, but I really needed to focus on that science stuff.
Learning what you're good at and what you're not good at is kind of the same thing. I spent my entire youth growing up, dreamed of being a football player, American football. And because you guys call football soccer.
Oh, it depends. It can be rugby. It can be Australian rules football. It can be soccer.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to, anytime I'm speaking to someone internationally, it's like, no, American football. I'm not, because you say football, like, oh, soccer. So, but no, I grew up playing that sport, and I didn't have the God-given talent for that sport. Right. And it didn't dawn on me until after my senior year when I was turning in my equipment. Like I wasn't super explosive, ultra fast. I wasn't a big guy. I wasn't really strong.
You're like, I suck at football. I'm going to teach math.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But no, I got into martial arts, and suddenly it required different types of athleticism. I'm more of a mid-range athlete. Like, I would not be a 100-meter sprinter, but maybe like a 400 or an 800-meter sprinter probably would have been my event in track.
Yeah. You're like me.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where my athleticism sits in that range right there. And it took me a while to understand that. And so then when it came to formulating game plans and my fighting style, gravitates towards that kind of fighting style. Like, I'm not quick out of the gates. You can watch my fights. I typically, increase as I go, as the rounds go. I can remember trying to negotiate for 5-round fights instead of 3-round fights, because I'm like, the more time I have, the more I'm going to wear you down.
You just need that punch-o-meter to get into the red before you get angry enough to start hurting them back.
Exactly. Well, the whole idea was to try to dodge those punches, but not always successful in that case.
I'm going to have to go back and watch these now.
Oh, please do. Yeah, give me your assessment on it. So it's all about understanding yourself, like you said, like knowing what your weaknesses are. But that's kind of what I think for me. I got really good at that even probably at a fairly young age, because we started doing, like, when you start prepping a game plan for an opponent, you're automatically starting to look at, like, okay, here's what I do well, here's what I don't do well, here's what he does well, and here's what he doesn't do well, and trying to, formulate that game plan, that path of least resistance, so to speak. And so you become very self-aware and critical of your strengths, your weaknesses, and
well, I think that is indicative of people that are at a high level. And I see this not for just like people like us that need to do well in every single aspect of our role, but for everyone as well. And for most people, they'll focus on what they're good at. Yeah. And whatever it is that they're not good at, they won't worry about it, because you never like doing things that you're not good at. And so this comes into play in like relationships, in communication, absolutely, into like dealing with depression or PTSD, or dealing with hard scenarios in life. Like, if you don't focus on those, then you're never going to get better at them, and you need to get better at them. And so most people won't do that because they don't feel like they need to. But we need to focus, in normal life. We're not at the top of our games anymore, you and I. We live very different lives to what we were doing before. And so we still need to be able to do that as well in the normal everyday stuff, so that we can get better in our relationships, so we can get better at our communications and interacting with other people. So, we don't flip our lid and go crazy. We have to be able to focus on areas like de-escalation and, talking our way out of brutally punching people in the face, because they're just, they don't understand us. They don't understand the fight away. They don't understand the military way. They're stupid. I just want to punch them in the face. So we've got to focus on those weak areas as well, just like everyone else. We can't shy away from them.
Well, you learn, for example, use the word de-escalation. You learn that as a young man, like, I wasn't necessarily good at de-escalation, say, right? Because in my world, I don't need to de-escalate. I can just fight somebody and legally. But then what happens is that you don't have the skill of de-escalation, which, I don't know, I guess at this stage of my life could become problematic in a corporate environment, for example, or even prior to this, even during my career, like, could become problematic in relationships. Because if you don't know how to de-escalate an argument, for example, then it's like that weak link of whatever you have, like whatever the weakest link in the chain is, will get exposed in some other facet of life if you don't take that time to actually really hone in on that skill. And so that's why I always tell people, man, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said that, speaking of weak links, that the only things you were afraid of was shark attacks and public speaking at one point in time.
Yeah, at one point in time, basically my whole life. The sharks, man, because especially like being in the water all the time with the Navy, you'd get bumped in the middle of the night, or you'd see shadows, and you just kind of go, "Oh, nah, that wasn't a shark." There's an old diver saying, "No such thing as cold, can't, or sharks." Yeah. And so I just go into that realm. No such thing as sharks. I don't worry about them because they scare the shit out of me. And then public speaking as well. I quit an information technology course when I was 19 because they made us start speaking in front of the class. And I did one, and I plagiarized some crap about computer hacking out of a book. I don't even think they had the internet then. And I was shaking, and my eyes were watering, and my face went cherry red, and I quit the next day. When after my shark attack and my recovery, and the Australian public were watching it a lot because it was such huge news in the media, and I started getting a lot of speaking requests for companies when I was back working with the Navy again as an instructor, and I was like, nope, I have absolutely no interest in speaking in front of people. And then the cancer camp for kids canteen came along, and I was like, God, you can't say no to kids with cancer. And so, my two greatest fears in life have actually become my two greatest strengths. They've actually become my whole career. I host Shark Week on Discovery Channel, and I'm a motivational, inspirational speaker. So it's like it can happen. You can turn your weakest weaknesses into your greatest strengths.
I'll say this though, there's a difference between hosting a show, or even when I fought and Joe would get up at the end of Rogan, he would come into the ring at the end of the fight and start asking me questions. And I have, all these people in the arena and there's millions of people around the world watching type of thing. Like that never bothered me because you're just answering a question. But when you have to give a prepared speech, if you got note cards or whatever way you go about doing it, and you step out on a stage and suddenly that spotlight's like, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, it does. It takes a bit of getting used to. I remember the first year I did it, I'd come off stage and I'd just stop and think, I have no idea what I just said. Like this whole last hour was blank.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now I love it. Like you get used to it. It's like what you're doing now. Like, how to draw things out of people. When you're on stage, it's mainly a one-way conversation. It looks like a one-way conversation, but the conversation for you is the energy and the sounds from the crowd, which is driving, how you're presenting. And so for me, I absolutely love it now.
Yeah, I remember my first several speaking engagements that I did, and I would always tell people, like, I'm more nervous doing this than fighting. I would rather fight. No joke. You get up on stage and I hated it. But I did a lot of stuff with the military in the US. I'll tell you a funny story. Funny, but unintentionally funny. So I was at I was in Camp Lejeune in the US here at the Wounded Warriors Barracks. And there was a bunch of Marines down there that they were wounded, and it was just a little speaking engagement with a smaller, more intimate group of people. And I think this is the point where I probably got over my fear of speaking. And I was talking to these guys, and after I was done talking, I kind of opened up the Q&A, and they were just asking me questions. And you get some funny questions, like the kids that ask you the questions at the cancer ward. And this guy says to me, he says, have you ever thought about fighting at 170? Because I fought at 185 middleweight. And I said, my response was, man, if I wanted to fight at 170, I'd have to cut off a leg. And as soon as I said that, I was like, the word leg, and I'm like, no, come back, trying to grab this word. Like, and because he was, missing a leg from an IED. And I looked at him, I said, man, I am so sorry. And he goes, he's
I
like,
guarantee they laughed.
He thought they laughed because it was even funnier because they didn't care, and it put me in the awkward situation. Right. Yeah. And so now it's like, now they can just harass me the whole time, and which makes it even better. But yeah, you want to talk about feeling like a jackass, man. That was like just terrible.
Yeah. Luckily you did it in the right environment. That dark humor that the military used, man, that gets you through a lot of hard times.
Yeah, for sure, man. When you were talking to the kids, the cancer ward, and you said, what were the questions they asked you? Something
about, have you killed anybody?
Yeah.
How much is your watch worth? Are they the new Nikes? And I was preparing myself with all these in-depth conversations, and I took off my hand and I passed it around. They're like, how much does your hand weigh?
Yeah.
These kids, man, they're just kids.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, these kids that are in a situation like that, because I've visited, I've visited cancer wards and hospitals. I do a lot. Well, I don't do a lot now, but I've done quite a bit of work with the Children's Hospital here in Cincinnati prior. And I mean, they're kids. They're going through a lot of stuff, right? Like many of these kids know that their life is on the line, and so even though they're kids, like they definitely have a very adult mentality about what's going on, and they're at peace with things. And so, but yeah, when you started, like the chapter in your book was titled "Are those Nikes?" And then I'm like, and then when you were opening up the questions and that question came out, I was like, oh, this is hilarious. But it's so typical, because even in situations like that, like I've been to medical hospitals for wounded warriors in the military that have come back, and guys that are freshly wounded, missing legs, or burn victims or whatever, and like I visited this triple amputee one time at Bethesda North, and I asked him, I said, man, what's the first thing you're going to do when you get out of here? And he still had his jaw wired shut, and he looked at me and said, I'm going to need a cheeseburger. Like, he was straight up like, and I said, I said, man, I hate to break the news to you, but most likely when you get out of here, your jaw is going to be so atrophied that you won't even be able to chew this cheeseburger, unfortunately.
Not very nice of you.
Yeah, I'm just a dream crusher.
Crush his dream.
When you were in the hospital going through rehab, well, let me ask you this: have you ever met Bethany Hamilton, by the way?
Yeah, I know Bethany well.
Yeah. Because I actually interviewed her for my podcast about a year ago now.
Nice. She's a total sweetheart.
She's awesome, man. And her story, like she was in the hospital and she immediately was wanting to get back in the water like right away, which I found surprising even with yourself, because you guys are just like, yeah, I'm gonna get in the water. I'm kind of a tackle your fears kind of guy as well, you know, but I think there'd be a piece of me that's like, maybe I can work on a different fear, you know. I kind of need to get back in the water.
I don't know. I feel like there's a couple of ways you can look at it. You can look at it like, it's happened once. What are the chances of it happening again? Like, just to get attacked by a shark is such a low percentage. To get attacked twice, it's got to be almost impossible. So there's that, and then there's I've already been through the worst thing that could actually ever happen to me, getting eaten alive by a shark. There's nothing left to be afraid of anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was really beneficial, being able to think like that, moving into speaking on stage and doing television and acting and things like that. Like there's literally nothing left to be afraid of, which is I've just taken up snowboarding. Let me tell you, there is other things to be afraid of.
in your book, speaking of snowboarding, training for the somebody approaching you about the Paralympics or whatever, competing. So I was working with the Disabled American Vets and was their spokesperson for a couple years. And I was at their winter games one year, and I was on the slopes with this guy who was a triple amputee, missing 2 legs and 1 arm. And they had a body like a body mold that was outfitted to a monorail. And then his missing arm was also another ski. And then he had a pole in his fully functional arm. And we, he and I had been kind of teasing each other throughout the day and hanging out. And so we get to the top of this mountain, and we're in Aspen. And I said to him, I said, "You want to race down?" And he was like, "If you can keep up." And I was like, "Oh, it's like that." So he takes off, and then I try to take off after him. And this guy was so fast. And he's on a monorail too. And he's just shredding. And I'm from Ohio, so I'm not an amazing snowboarder anyway, right? But I mean, I'm decent. And I couldn't even come close keeping up with him. And I get to the bottom. I was like, what the hell? I was like, man, I just got hustled basically. Like, good thing we went bet money. And my buddy looks at me, he goes, yeah, he was a gold medalist at the Paralympics. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Oh, well, now it makes sense, so. Yeah, man, those guys, they're legit. I got beat up on playing sledge hockey on the little monorails on the ice. And yeah, they definitely wanted to get their licks in on. It's like, oh, the fighter's on the ice now and he's out of his element. So we're going to show him how to play this game. So, yeah. Yeah,
that's brutal, man. I just went snowboarding for the first time a couple of weeks ago. My girlfriend and her mum took me up to Colorado to Telluride. And then I hit Big Bear a week later. Bro, I love it. And I looked into it, and there's no one on the Australian Paralympic snowboarding team with my level of amputation. So there's you can have above knee amputee leg, a below knee. So I've got a weird one because I've got one above knee and one hand. So I'd have to choose one category, but there's no one in my category for the whole Australian team. So I'm thinking 50 years old at the next the Winter Paralympics. So, bro, I love it. And I killed it. I'm doing really, really good.
I'm just telling you now. I'm just telling you now, man. These guys, the people that you're going to compete against, they're no joke, man. It's
yeah.
So
I can imagine, but you got to have dreams, man.
Exactly. Well, listen, I don't want to be a dream crusher.
Again.
I'm not going to do that again to you. So I'm behind you. As a matter of fact, I'll come out and go snowboarding with you to help you get ready for it.
Wait, I reckon. I think they've got snow at Mount Hood in Oregon till June. So either Mammoth or Mount Hood for me next, in the next couple of weeks. I got to go crush it again.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that'd be cool, man.
Try and get some sponsorship. How good would it be to have a life where you just get paid to travel around the world and snowboard?
Well, here, let me. Speaking of sponsorships, I'll just say this. And I'm not saying that you're not good, but you don't have to be amazing at something to get a sponsorship. And here's a perfect example. So I was living down in Singapore, and I was down there wakeboarding one day, and I'm a decent wakeboarder. I can't do tons of tricks. I'm not amazing. But I was able to pull off this tantrum, which is a backflip off of one of the ramps at the wake park. And so I posted it on my socials. And then this company sees it and was like, hey, we would like to sponsor you. And I was like, what? I'm not a wakeboarder. And they're like, yeah, but you know, and so they wanted to like outfit me with gear and all that. It was kind of weird because I'm used to being sponsored in one sport because that's what I did professionally, but for this. And so, yeah. So anyway, I was offered all these sponsorships and well, not all these, just a couple different sponsorships. And it was just kind of weird. I was like, huh, I could be a sponsored athlete as a wakeboarder. Made me feel pretty good about myself. Didn't change my ability though.
Yeah. Well, look, I've only been 4 times and I'm already slaying it. Like I've put a couple of videos on my Instagram, like for one leg and having never done it in my life and being 45, I think I'm pretty freaking good at it. So I'm going to just really buckle down on it and get really good.
So the leg that you use for snowboarding is different than the leg that you would use for swimming, because I would imagine they both are kind of somewhat wet legs.
Yeah, so the one I use for snowboarding, you can use for things like wakeboarding, motocross, that sort of stuff. It's got Fox shocks in the shin, which is technically the knee, and then they've got Fox shocks in the foot, which works as the ankle. And then for diving and things like that, I would use a diving leg that is it might have springs or hydraulics in it. If I'm just strictly swimming, then I'll use the everyday leg that I have. Because it's waterproof. So it's like 150, 200 grand. It's got 6 microprocessors in it, accelerometers, gyroscopes. I don't know what any of that shit does, but you know, I can walk with long pants on and you wouldn't even know that I have a prosthetic leg, but I can also swim with it. It does have a running mode as well, but you need a special foot for it. And then I've got the running blade, 2 diving legs, weightlifting arms, with all these different go-go gadget attachments for it, and then the snowboarding leg. So when I go away, I got to choose what the hell I'm going to do because my luggage can get get heavy real quick with those limbs.
That's great. I'm never going to complain about like, you know, if you ever travel with like, say, for example, like a woman, they typically have a lot smaller feet than you. And so I wear a size 12, US size 12 shoe. And so my feet aren't exactly little. And anytime I got to like, if I want to like go somewhere, I got to bring like my running shoes. If I'm going to plan on weightlifting, I use a different shoe for weightlifting. Then I got to have like a casual shoe to wear around. And so it's like, you know, I'm like, when did I become the guy that travels with like 5 pair of shoes, right? And it takes up a good portion of my suitcase. Never again am I going to complain about that. Like the next time I complain about it, I'll be like, you know what? Paul has it way worse than me because if you don't mind me asking, if this is a rude question, just tell me. But like, if you had to total up the value of all your prosthetics, what would that be? Because you just said 150, 200 grand with 6 microprocessor.
It's got to be close to $1 million with all my stuff.
Lord of mercy, it's so expensive to be an amputee.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't have to pay for any of it. Veteran Affairs pays for it now. Yeah. But then there's also companies out there like Unlimited Tomorrow is a new one that's just come out. And they're taking, I've got the best robotic hand in the world. This is like $90,000 for this thing. But there's like companies like Unlimited Tomorrow. I'm actually going to test out one of their hands in the next few weeks. They've brought the cost from $90,000 down to about 7 or 8 for something that is, I'll find out. They say it's just as good as this. So I'm going to find out and give it a test because I break my shit all the time when I'm out filming on boats and diving with sharks.
The inside of the prosthetic for your arm, it has sensors that work off of like essentially like brainwave
muscle activation.
Yeah.
So it presses against, say, like a muscle here, and it'll be like, I don't have the hand, but it's fundamentally flexing that outside muscle and then flexing the inside muscle. So it picks up the sensor there. You're basically just doing that. If I want to change the grip, I give it a little flick. It beeps and it goes to beer drinking grip.
How long did it take you to not crush a beer can, for example?
Oh, I still do because there's no sensory feedback. So I have to watch it. It's like when I shake a girl's hand, I have to watch the hand and make sure I'm not crushing the hand too much because I can't feel it. So I kind of just have to close it to a certain amount and then I might just turn it off and then it'll just stay in that grip.
Yeah, I'd probably just fist bump you instead.
Yeah. That's what Joe Rogan said. He keeps talking about me on the show saying that he met me and I knew he was scared I was going to crush his hand. He's like, can't we just fist bump, bro?
Yeah. I saw probably, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if I'd call them Gen 1 versions of the prosthetics, but when I was with the DAV one time, I was with a guy who was learning how to operate that off of an amputated arm, like moving the grip and whatnot. And he kept Yeah, he kept like crushing things, and he was.
Yeah.
It was like day 1 or day 2 with it, and he's just super frustrated. Like, ugh.
Yeah, the technology advanced so quickly during the Afghan war because there were so many American soldiers coming back missing limbs, and so the American government was pouring heaps of money into the R&D. So they just kind of skyrocketed in technology, and then the war's over, and everyone's coming home with not missing limbs and stuff. So the money dried up, and the R&D dried up, and so it's just kind of stagnated in terms of getting better than what we have now, unfortunately. There's always massive technological advancements in times of war, and prosthetics was no different. So people think that you can get prosthetic limbs with it's tied into your nerves and you're activating it with your brain, and I believe places like DARPA are still investigating that, but there's nothing on the horizon that's going to be able to do that in the next few years, unfortunately, which is what I was hoping for.
So you have an entire suitcase of prosthetics when you travel then, in essence?
Yeah, well, I got to take other stuff as well. So I got to take toiletries and clothes, and so I got sneakers too. So I usually choose what I'm going to do. I won't take, my snowboarding leg, my running blade, both my diving legs, my weightlifting arm. It'll be like, I'll take my weightlifting arm, and I'll take, if it's work for Shark Weekend, I'll take my diving leg. And that's about it. And then I'll wear these two. So, my luggage can get real heavy if I'm going on a vacation and I want to do everything.
Yeah. It's like, typically like if I'm going away for say a weekend or 4 days, like I might only take like one pair of jeans, but I'll wear those jeans because they take up way more space than like my shorts, So so I'm wearing this one, I'm wearing that one. But then it kind of sucks for you because I don't know, you're working and suddenly everybody's like, hey man, let's go for a jog. And you're like, crap, I didn't bring my running leg this time, or whatever, like opportunity.
Well, for me, it's like, I got to take wetsuits with me. And the production company is always like, oh, you bring your own tanks and weights. And I'm like, hell no, I'm not bringing all that stuff that weighs too much. I got to bring limbs, and I'll bring my own wetsuit, but I'm only bringing one wetsuit because that shit takes up too much. So if I get out there and it's freezing cold and I've only taken like a 3.2 mil wetsuit, fuck it, I'm going to be cold. Hopefully I can just borrow someone else's wetsuit to put over the top or underneath.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know. I've been in cold water before where I didn't have that proper wetsuit, and you're free. Like, that's miserable, man. It's just, it takes all the fun out of the dive.
Yeah, but when there's a 4 12-foot great white sharks coming at your face without a cage, cold takes a back seat.
Yeah, you know what? I think it would take like maybe 1 4-foot great white shark, and that's about all I would need. And cold would take a backseat to that. Yeah.
It's funnily enough, it's not, I don't get scared for myself in those scenarios. It's more like when I'm working with the celebrities, like, I had to teach Ronda Rousey how to hand feed bull sharks in Fiji. I get more scared about that because, I'm responsible for her. I'm the one teaching her, and she's got these $1 million fists, and it's like a millisecond between her having a hand and a bull shark ripping it off. And so, Mike Tyson as well, like, you're taking him down, and he was a terrible diver. Like, we had him in the pool practicing. He didn't even kick his legs. He was trying to bear crawl through the water, and then he quit after 10 minutes because breathing was too hard. And I'm like, I got to take this guy out to the Bahamas and have him surrounded by sharks, hammerheads, tigers, reef sharks. And he's going to get killed. He's terrified. And then he gets down there and he starts grabbing everything, wrapping his arms around the sharks. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to die.
Is it amazing how when you remove certain athletes from their environment, how terrible they are at other things? Like swimming, for example.
Yeah. But I get, you got to give him the credit for his heart. He actually went along with it. I was trying to get out of him why he was doing it. I'm like, this was right before he did that, what do they call it? What's the word?
The expedition match.
Is that what it's called? That's what I would say. Expedition. It's not expedition.
I'm lost for words. Yeah, we're having a brain fart here.
Like, Mike,
exhibition.
Do this?
Exhibition match.
Like, Mike, why do you want to go diving with sharks? Like, this is some dangerous shit. Like, he's like, I think my wife's trying to kill me. I think she just wants the money. And I'm like, I can't put that in the show. And I'm trying to go deeper. I'm like, Mike, why are you doing it? And I leave him alone. and production pull him aside inside the boat, and they're trying to get him to like come out with something, you know, deep and meaningful as to why he wants to dive with sharks. And he gets fed up with them, and he goes, "Look, I'm scared of these fucking sharks, but I'm not scared of killing all you motherfuckers." The room just went quiet, and I heard yelling. I'm like, "Oh, fuck, I got to go in there and see what's going on." I went in, and everyone's like pale-faced, and they all crept out of the room. I was like, "Whoa, did that really happen?" And he's like, Mike's pissed off, and his trainer was there, and he's a friend of mine, and his assistant Troy there is a friend of mine. We're talking, we're trying to cheer him up, and I'm like, "I know how to do this," because we're going to get him in the water with the sharks in like 10 minutes. I'm like, "We're going to get Mike some weed." And so we get him some weed. He smokes out on the boat. He's all happy again, and we get him in for the last dive, and he didn't die. Thank God.
So you reverted back to your teenage years for a solution.
Exactly.
Your experience came in handy there.
Yep.
From the time that you put them in the pool for training for this, like when you guys are in the pool, I saw some of the pool work there, to the time that you're actually in the water with the sharks, how much time has transpired between the two?
Very little, like days, if that. So Ronda Rousey was like maybe a week before doing the dive in Fiji. She was doing her course. I think we did Will Smith, and his was about that. I think it's about a week to a couple of days. So there's no time for learning anything. And it shows when they get in the water. But people like Ronda, man, like she is a world-class athlete, and you can see why she's so good at what she does, because she'd be good at anything she does, because she listens, she analyzes, she works on the information that you're giving her and dissects it and breaks it down and can actually retrieve it and use it when it's required. Like, she's amazing. Mike wasn't as good, but he's a boxer in water, so not exactly his environment. Will Smith did great, but after his first dive, he got out and he was like, "That was it. I don't need to do anymore." So you really get to see who thrives in these scenarios and who doesn't.
Yeah, I would imagine that if you worked with a lot of MMA athletes, they're probably all going to be that same way. And because MMA is one of those sports where, regardless, even if you're an emotional fighter, like I'm very cerebral when I compete, but you have to be, because there's so much input, right? But as a guy's coming across the cage, I mean, you've done some Muay Thai, and you don't know if they're going to throw a punch, throw a kick, or shoot a takedown. And it can go so many different directions, and you really have to be a student of the game. Like, you can't just kind of like pick one avenue and say like, this is what I'm going to do. You're constantly like adapting to your environment and figuring out ways to overcome. And so that mindset, I think, would play into, for a lot of mixed martial arts athletes, into any other endeavor that they do. At least, I don't know, it does for me, I guess. But
yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. You guys are working on microseconds worth of information and have to respond to that in that same time frame, whether it be, just like you were saying, whether it's someone shooting, whether it's someone kicking, whether someone's charging, whether it's a hook or a jab, or so many different variables and scenarios going on. That makes you more in tune with being in an environment like where I would take you, into the realm with sharks. We're doing the same thing. We don't know if this 12, 13-foot tiger shark is going to jet up in front of us, whether, once we've palmed it off and there's another one coming over here, if I take my hand off that one, is he going to turn directly back on me and try and take my head off while I'm dealing with this bull shark? And so it's like the perfect scenario for taking an MMA fighter in there, because I've seen it. Ronda thrived.
I'll tell you what, that scenario would be, it would be a bit weird to me, because so there was an aquarium here in Cincinnati that had some sharks years ago. I was building a pond in the back of my yard, and so I had to go to this special aquarium. There's one part of town to get certain parts I needed for this pond that I couldn't find anywhere else. And I went in, and they had a I don't know, man, like a 10,000 gallon tank in this aquarium, and they had two sharks in the aquarium. And so I was looking, I was like, "Oh, wow." And I said, yeah, I started asking questions about the sharks. And I said, "I heard that if you touch a shark like one way, it's kind of smooth, but if you do it the other way, it's like rough, like sandpaper." And he goes, "Yeah, it's kind of how they are." And he says, "You want to touch one?" And they're swimming around in this pool, like real nice and calm. And I was like, "Sure." You know, like, yeah, I'd love to. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to feed him in about 10 minutes. And so he had on he had like one of those
Chainmail.
Yeah, chainmail gloves. And he was, you know, putting like some mackerel or whatever he was putting over the side of the pool. And these things were just swimming around so nice and calm. Like just, I was like, wow, these are just peaceful animals. And as soon as he put that fish over the edge of that pool, Lord, man, they just like snakes, like a snake strike. It was the fastest thing I ever. He said, and he explained. He said, as soon as I put this fish over, I want you to just reach over and they'll fight for the fish. So just reach over and just try to and touch one. And I was like, okay, like, and I thought they were just. I mean, I've seen videos of SeaWorld. I see how the dolphins come up and they're like, you know, and they just grab the fish nice and slow. So I thought like,
this is more like piranhas.
Yeah, right. I thought it was going to be like that. And then these things come up and I'm like, it just in a flat, like a blink of an eye, and the fish was gone. And I was like, I looked at him like, you want me to put my hand in that? Are you stupid? And he's like, no, man. He said, they're worried about the fish. He's like, just get your hand in there. He's like, I'll try to hold on to the fish longer. So, yeah, anyway, I got to barely touch a shark at that point in time. But after seeing the sharks, how fast they move, and then, you know, looking at you, like just palming the nose of a shark, I'm like, nah, I've seen them move a little faster than that. Like they're pretty fast animals.
Yeah, they can. But one of the great things about working and diving with sharks is the simple fact that they are and they can be like that. But yeah. They are the only wild animal that I can think of in the world that would allow you to share their environment with them. You know, like you couldn't hang out with a bear, a wolf, a tiger, a lion, a panther, a fucking hippopotamus, a pig. Not like any wild animal in the wild will mess you up. Whereas a shark, given the right environment, will allow you to share that environment with them. And I think that's pretty special.
I'm going to argue this point with you. I've fed chipmunks from my hand before. They're
about wild animals, bro.
Hey, they're wild. They're wild. These are not tame chipmunks. Still, I've fed deer before. They're pretty chill about things sometimes. They'll typically run from you. So like I'm just saying.
What about a moose? You fed a moose?
No, but I'll tell you this much. I was in Alaska one time, and this was at a time in my life where I did not understand how destructive a moose could be. And we went out looking for a moose. You know, we're walking through the woods, and you know, and my buddy, we're like tracking this thing. He's like, okay, here's some moose droppings here and there, and we're like looking, and then all of a sudden, I look to my right, and I see this moose probably, I don't know, 40 yards off me, and I was like, and I start walking towards it without saying anything. I'm just walking straight at the moose. Like I grew up in the Midwest, right? Like cows, they're pretty friendly. Bulls aren't, so I don't know why I didn't like make that connection. But yeah, I'm just walking towards the moose, and everybody there. I'm like midway to the moose, and this thing's just staring at me, and they're like, "What are you?" And I was like, "Hey guys, the moose is right here. Like, I'm just gonna walk up and pet it." And they're like, no.
You're crazy.
Yeah, I didn't realize what kind of danger I was in, but fortunately, nothing ended up coming out of that. But yeah, that's stupidity, lack of knowledge.
That's what people think about kangaroos as well. You only make that mistake once when you're a kid. Yeah. I walked over to try and feed a kangaroo and look in its pouch when I was a kid, and it leaned back on its tail, gave me 2 feet directly in the chest, and flung me across the park. Yeah, those things are strong.
I've seen videos. I saw a video. There's a video that went viral. I'm sure you saw the video of the guy that boxed the kangaroo because it was attacking his dog or whatever. Yeah. No, it's something that you definitely wouldn't want to mess with either. But that's what ignorance of a typical subject will lead you to is that kind of situation. So you do a lot of scuba diving. I saw some videos of you skydiving.
Yeah. I just got my new parachute.
Are you an avid skydiver?
Actually, only got my parachute license because I had to do a show for Shark Week where me and a British Special Forces guy parachuted directly into the Pacific Ocean for 2 nights and 2 days with no food or water, surrounded by sharks. We had to like show people how we'd survive, and we had to make it to shore, and it was a horrible, horrible experience. Especially after doing it the year before in the Atlantic Ocean, where they blew up our boat and we drifted through the Atlantic. But I discovered that, and I really wanted to do it before, but what held me back was actually being a bit afraid of not the fact that I couldn't do it, the fact that they wouldn't let me try because I didn't have a hand and I didn't have a leg. And so that's what held me back from actually going and trying. And so when, the production company for Shark Week came along and said, "Oh, we're going to pay for you to do it," I was like, hell yeah. And so I went out and did the accelerated freefall course, and I love it. They didn't look after my parachute when I parachuted into the ocean, unfortunately, and that one got all screwed up and rusted and stuff. So
was it your gear?
Yeah, well, they paid for it, so I couldn't even really get mad at them. But, I wanted a parachute after the show. So it's been about 2 years, and I finally just got my new parachute. So I'm going to head out to Lake Elsinore and get requalified because, I love it, man. It's so much fun.
Dude, yeah, I'm addicted to it. And so I don't have my own rig yet. I promised myself I'm at about right now, probably about 40 jumps, which to some of the listeners out there would sound like a lot of jumps, but I'm telling you, I mean, like the instructors, I got certified out in Eloy in Arizona, and it's Skydive Arizona, and like the guys out there, like 10,000 jumps is for an instructor. It's like, like, oh,
well, you're gonna do 25 jumps just to get your A license.
Yeah, exactly.
And then another 25 to get your B license.
Yeah.
And that's like 10,000. I did in the Army, we did a form of jumping called static line jumping.
Yep.
And so very different to free fall. You basically jump out of the plane, the parachute deploys, and you descend to the ground at a rapid rate of knots and try not to die. But the funny thing about parachuting was, I wasn't wearing this hand. I had my weightlifting arm with a steel hook on.
Yeah,
so I could pull the little slip out, put that through there, and I'm kind of like, whoa. But like the free falling, the jumping out, when they're holding on to you and stuff, making sure you can balance, and then they let you go because accelerated free fall, you do your first sort of descent by yourself. The instructors just sort of hold on to you and then let go, make sure you're all right. But then I pull my parachute and I'm drifting down to the ground and I'm just wetting myself laughing, thinking I could fucking die right now. I've never done this before in my life. I don't know how to do it. All I've done is this on the ground, and now I'm like coming in to land on the ground, and I bruised my tailbone pretty bad, but great incentive not to land on your bum anymore and land on your feet.
Yeah, I saw the landing where you walked in. It was a nice, smooth landing, actually. So, so you adapted really quickly. So I was wearing an altimeter. I was borrowed it from a friend, and I came into the ground, and the problem with flaring, like when you're an inexperienced jumper, is they tell you like the ground looks closer than it is, so don't flare too early. And I'm coming in and I'm looking at the altimeter, and it it was really nice digital altimeter, and I thought like, well, this is probably accurate to the inch, So I'm coming in, I'm like, man, the ground, it looks pretty close, and as I'm coming into the ground and I look at the altimeter, I'm like, nope, I still got 60 feet left. And,
geez.
No. And so at the end of it, the guys there, the instructor was like, no, actually, once you're below, say like 200 feet, you can just completely disregard the altimeter, and it's all about depth perception at that point. Yeah, I ended up smacking the ground and landing on my tailbone pretty hard. I'll tell you what, you do that once and you make that adjustment real quick, So what's it like for you stabilizing in the air, with your prosthetic in your leg? Because there's obviously a lot more drag on one side of the body than the other.
Well, it's not really about the drag. I descend really fast. I don't know why. I guess I might be heavy or something, but
it's because there's less drag because the air's flying by you faster.
But I'm still kind of like most of the time I'm wearing like baggy pants and a jacket and stuff like everyone else. When I was practicing jumping into the ocean in my wetsuit, no one could keep up with me. But I came up with this little rule in my head because I don't know what my leg's doing. Because from the knee down, my leg just does whatever it wants. Oh yeah. So I know from experience now, if I'm going left, I need to left is extend the leg, right retract. So if I'm spinning this way, it means that my robot leg is pointing outwards, and the wind will slowly sort of push it up like that. But if I'm going right, I need to retract it, and that's sort of like as long as I can get my hands all right. The spinning, I know exactly what to do. So it's like anything, man. It just comes with practice.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know because I saw you jumping because I just jumped last week again, and it was my first time jumping in a couple years, just with COVID and everything, and living overseas. Yeah. And so when I saw you falling in the air, I was like, man, it must be real difficult for you to maintain heading or course. Or have you done any tracking or anything like that yet where you choose a direction?
Not really. We I did one jump with 4 other dudes, and it basically became aerial ping pong. It was wild. We're all just like flying into each other, and no one could control anything. It's like I said, man. You get better the more you practice at it. I haven't done it for a few years now, either probably 3 years, and so those are the things that I'll be working on now once I get back into it. It's just like, it's so much fun. There's so many things you could do. Like, I think it was like my 4th or 5th jump, I'm doing a triple somersault out of the plane.
Yeah, I saw that which would be really fun. So, but you haven't done anything like your docking skills or any of that kind of stuff where you've tried to maneuver around somebody or any of that yet?
A little bit. You know, we were on a bit of a timeline to get me qualified for the show. So I didn't really get a lot of time to practice those things. It was basically just get me qualified as fast as possible. And then the week later, I was in Palau in the South Pacific. I nearly died on that jump, actually, because I couldn't stop my spin. Our jump master the plane was so small that we had a jump master with us, because me and James, the British Special Forces guy, we'd never jumped before either. So together. So they brought on a jump master from the British Special Forces. He was going to watch us, make sure everything went all right. And the plane's so small that he's like, okay, I'm going to get out and I'm going to stand on the wheel and I'm going to hold on to the strut of the wing. You guys move into the door as I do that. And then when the green light goes on, we'll all go together. Yeah. So he moves out, we move into the door, and he just, boom, he's gone. And we just like, what the? The light's still red. Like, so we look at each other, grab on, and we just roll out of the plane thinking we've got to follow him down because we don't know where he's going. He could be injured or something. But because we haven't presented it very well, we just sort of rolled out together. We're going, whoop, 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 whoop. And the only thing we can see is each other's face because we're just spinning too hard. And we give the nod, we let go, and you can see me on his GoPro on his helmet just going, whoop, 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 and I'm gone. This is like some Mission Impossible spinning out of control shit, and I can't get control. I don't know what to do. I've literally just finished my parachute course. So I'm like, I got to do this. Arch my back, and I'm still spinning. And I hit 5,000 feet, and the alarm in my helmet's going off. I'm still spinning. I've got that AAD, the automatic activation device, that will go off if I hit a certain altitude, at a certain velocity. And if I'm still spinning, that's going to wrap me up like a burrito and turn me into salsa on the ground. And so I'm thinking, I got to stop. I hit like 3,000 and I'm still spinning. I'm at 2,500. And then, and so I finally stopped spinning, freaking out. And all I see is blue. And I'm thinking, we jumped over the jungle. Why am I over the ocean all of a sudden? Oh, that's the sky. I'm upside down. So I punch my left hand, flip over, the jungle's coming directly at me. And we've jumped into 22 knot winds. The most you can jump into on your learner's course for me was like 14. And so I'm jumping into nearly double the amount of wind. I nearly got slammed we're jumping into the international airport. And so we've got the runway, a little strip of grass, and then a barbed wire fence off a cliff into the jungle in 17 knot winds, and we're going to land on that little strip of grass. It was insane, and that was just the practice jump for the show.
And you didn't have a coach or anybody there with you. So did you deploy, or did the AD deploy?
Yeah, I deployed. I stopped at about 2,500 feet. Pulled it, and because the 22 knot winds were actually pushing us towards the drop zone, because we jumped so far away from where we were supposed to, because it wasn't even green on at that point. Luckily, the 22 knot winds pushed us directly to the drop zone, but then tried to push us off the cliff.
I'm assuming that they were planning on you guys deploying at like 5 or 55 or something like that, and so you would have had plenty of canopy time to get to where you needed to be anyway. And but at 25, you're like, you're gonna start hitting trees. You know, like
exactly.
Did you make it to the landing zone?
I made it directly. I was like angled directly to the base of the runway. I got there. I turned into it. So I'm like this because the wind's trying to push me that way. I've got one all the way down, one all the way up, and I'm not even moving. I'm just like still. And I land, and I just land on my feet. And I'm like, oh, that was awesome. And then the wind picked up my parachute, pulled me backwards. I went sliding into the fence.
Lord of mercy, man. I'll tell you what, that destabilization on that, like your life was probably just in as much danger with that as it was when you got bit by the shark.
Oh, Oh yeah, it's like
no kidding.
It's seconds away from death.
Yeah, and I've had plenty of situations like that in my life where I drove a 4-wheeler off of a mountain one time. It was about a 70-degree embankment, almost, and it looked like, I don't know if you've ever seen The Price is Right. It looked like the Plinko board on The Price is Right, just trees and I didn't hit nothing. Like I should be dead. And you just kind of like no, there's another Tuesday of riding a quad runner, no big deal. And
dude, all you got to do is get kicked in the head. You turn up to work one day, you get kicked or punched in the head wrong, and you're gone. You're down for the count. Like brain damage, broken spine, broken face. Like I love watching UFC. I go to my buddy Mike's place and we watch it all the time. But I can't imagine why anyone would want a career where they can get kicked and punched in the face by the most powerful fighters on the planet.
Well,
that
I
just
don't know
seems
why.
Crazy to me.
I don't know why anybody would want a career where they're swimming with some of the deadliest predators on the planet as well, right? Like, I mean, to each their own, so.
Fair call.
Touche. Listen, I'll just say this. I enjoyed your book. For the listeners out there, where can they, because you have a new book out, correct?
Yeah, the new one's Uncaged.
I didn't read that one.
Oh, you got the old one, No Time for Fear.
Yeah.
So that was that came out like 2012. And so it stopped at 2012 and it was only released in Australia. And so I've been out here for so long and so much of the story has developed. I wanted to redo that whole story and then update it. And so I wrote Uncaged. That came out this year. So that's on Amazon. And then we've got the shark book coming out in July, which is strictly about sharks and my stories with sharks.
I appreciate you coming on. And I think the cool thing about this conversation is a lot of people can take away with, and you said this before, it's like you're never limited, even with what has happened to you in your life. It's like a lot of people would see you as having limitations. You're like, I'm not going to live with limitations and I'm not going to live with fear. At this point, the worst of the worst has happened to you. And so.
Well, I had a guy say that to me literally yesterday. I train at Gold's at the Mecca. Incredible place to train, very motivating, inspiring. And this old, like 70-year-old guy comes up to me with this big white mustache and he starts talking to me. And I mean, I'm friendly to everyone until I'm not. And he's just like, oh, good on you, mate. You're like, I'm like, oh, yeah, thanks. He's like, I'm very proud of you. I'm like, what for? He's like, well, you're disabled. And I was like, oh, God damn you. I just come back with like, who's more disabled? Me out here doing all this stuff or the people sitting on their asses at home, fat, eating cookie dough?
Yeah.
I don't see myself as disabled.
No,
and I don't think anyone deemed disabled should either unless they decide it.
Yeah.
We get to decide who we are.
Exactly. I had Jessica Cox. I spoke to another guest that I had on. She's born without arms. And wow. I watched the presentation of hers. She was on a TED Talk and she opened a can of soda with her feet, I think. And I think that's what she did. And the crowd just cheered like it was something amazing. And I said, it is truly amazing that she could do that. But it was like, at the same time, I'm like, it's terrible that the crowd would box you into this person. Like, oh, look at this poor girl who like she shouldn't be able to open a can of pop, but look at her. Wow, she did. And so, yeah, I get exactly what you're saying, man. It's like, so no, it's awesome. It's awesome that you coming out of that. I could probably talk to you for hours on this subject and living without limits, because that's really what the listeners could take away from this. So I appreciate you coming on today, Paul, a lot.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
Real quick, give your website a shout out and where can people find you on your socials?
I keep my socials easy. It's just my name, Paul de Gelder. You don't need the website unless you want to book me for speaking jobs. But YouTube, Instagram, whatever. I'm not really that big into it. I'm 45. I'm at the age where I don't really give a shit. I just kind of have to do it because that's part of the job now. But so I try and keep it interesting. I put on a bunch of my shark stuff and adventure stuff. But Instagram is probably where I spend most of my time.
It's cool, man. No, I checked out your page. So listen, if I make myself out to the West Coast at some point in time, I'll hit you up. We can get a snowboarding trip in. Probably not this year, but maybe in the fall.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, bro.
All right. Then I'll challenge you to a race down and see if I can keep up with you all the same.
All right. By next year, I should be faster.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for coming on.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel.